Good morning, everybody. Here's the full transcript of Andrew Colborn's deposition, which took place on the 21st of July 2022 and the 22nd of July 2022. Mr. Burnett, I'll bet you all the objection you can answer. I disagree with the transcript. Okay. On what basis? Let me ask you. You now watched the whole thing, correct? In fact, you haven't even watched the last 3 episodes at all, according to the stipulated facts, correct? That's correct, yes. So you have no idea in those last 3 episodes whether it tells both sides of the story, raises questions, encourages viewers to reach their own conclusions. You just don't know, correct? I don't know any of this content in the last 3 episodes, that's correct. Can you point me to where Making a Murder it contends that you planted evidence to frame Avery for Teresa Halbach? I believe there's quite a few examples in the complaint that were, so I'm not an attorney. I know, I hired attorneys to do the research to find that evidence. I'm asking you, and in fact, the best evidence of any testimony at trial would be the trial transcript itself, correct? Yes. And I think this goes both ways. But would you agree that the best evidence of what Making a Murder says about you is the documentary itself or a transcript of the documentary, correct? Well, I would surmise that there's probably more to Making a Murder than just the transcript of it. The video probably would be very telling, of course, inserting facial expression and stuff. You misunderstood my question. I'm just asking, you would agree that the best evidence of what Making a Murder says and portrays is the documentary itself? Yes. And you would not attempt to reword or characterize either the transcript or the documentary, correct? What do you mean by characterize the documentary? Try to paraphrase it or summarize it or characterize what it says. Would you instead just... What the fuck? This isn't the full fucking thing. Why is it going from... Oh. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I'm sorry. I'll just represent to you in the 3 episodes you didn't watch, yes. The reading of the verdict is shown, okay? And Stephen Avery just walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs in jail that detracts from the strong and definite statement that you planted evidence to frame him, correct? I don't know without watching it, I don't know. I don't know how, in what context it was shown, so I don't know. Do you have any intention of watching Making a Murder in the entirety? No? Okay. I don't. Despite litigating a federal lawsuit that may go to trial, you don't plan to watch the documentary that you sued over? It's ruined my life. I'm not going to pay to watch it. Well, that's not my question. I'll move such a thing. But a majority assumed he was guilty. Why would the police have arrested him and wasn't involved? I think I skipped over a sentence about Nancy Grace. Otherwise, I would read it correctly. Yes. Do you agree with the assessment that the local reaction to the murder of Teresa Halbach and arrest of Stephen Avery? I agree that there was some in the community that thought there was innocence. Some thought he had done this again. And I don't know the majority of which way or another. That's Mike's opinion. Exhibit 15B marked for identification. Question. So I'll no hand Exhibit 15B, which is also from the Innocent Killer. This is from a few pages later in the book, page 215. In the 3rd paragraph down, my script wrote, in the Avery case was naturally the chief topic of the discussion of warrants from the state of Teresa Halbach's appearance until the end of the trial. From Mike the window washer to the county executive, everyone in Warren had an opinion about the case, and given what I do for a living, I quote, you would agree with Ms. Heinsohn's statement, correct? Answer, Miss. I believe, and you know, you might have her interpretation of it, but yes, certainly Avery and his supporters did not quite or anywhere near as vocally. Law enforcement probably had a few supporters as well. So I want you to turn again to Exhibit 1, and then I'll stipulate what proposed, okay? And specifically number 11, 13, and 14, I'll read them out loud. Number 11 says, Mr. Colborn felt wronged by the frame-up theory put forth by the defense at Avery's trial. Number 13 says, Mr. Colborn felt frame-up theory put forth by the defense that Mr. Avery's child harmed his reputation. And hang on a second, okay? You see you're reading 11, 12, and 13 because mine says 13 blank. Yes, and 11, I know. And you said you could flip to the ones we proposed. Some documents to help me understanding why you won't agree to them. We'll come back to them probably at the end, and I'll just ask you again, just with some others, okay? So we're going to start by talking about Miss Schuler. My first question is, just when did you last speak to her? I can't give you an exact date, Miss Walker, but months ago. Okay. Have you talked to her since she was deposed in this case? No. So she hasn't told you about her deposition? She has not. Are you previously testified she's a friend of yours, correct? She is. And it would surprise you that produced more than 4,000 text messages with her in this case. I don't know how many text messages I've shared with her, but it doesn't surprise you to hear that it's over 4,000. Do you have 4,000 texts? I'll represent to you. It's over 4,000. You don't have to agree or disagree. Okay. Let me ask you just a few more questions to the sense of the nature of the friendship. She came to your retirement party, correct? Yes. And you went to your son's wedding? I did. And you've gone out to eat together? Yes. And you would say you trust her? I felt she was someone I could trust? Yes. And you would say that you have confided in her? Yes. And she's working as I discussed on the documentary called Convicting a Murder, correct? Yes. We asked you to admit that convicting a murder is meant to serve as a rebuttal to making a murder. Want to confirm that Exhibit 23 second review film, correct? So it's nothing dated again. Don't know which I said in the first interview. I was said in the second interview. I was never given a transcript of convicting a murder. So I have to represent to you that Ms. Schuler represented to us that you were interviewed twice, and Exhibit 8 and Exhibit 23 are transcripts from the two separate interviews, and you don't have any reason to think she's dishonest with us in any way or that, correct? If she doesn't have the date straight, I don't think she did it out of dishonesty, so no, I don't. Alright, and you agree that you sat for 2 recorded interviews with filmmakers. That I do agree to, yes, okay, and it's fine that you don't remember the exact date. Do you know whether Exhibit 8 or Exhibit 23 were first? Which one came first? Does it look like it would have come from the second? This is the second, okay, thank you. So, conviction. And Brenda said yes or no, and I said okay, and then she said okay, but felt defamed in my opinion. I would say he felt very wronged after the trial, during the trial, okay? I said, and she said, but felt redeemed with the verdict. That's Miss Schuler's testimony, and my question for you is, do you agree with her assessment? No. Which part do you disagree with? I don't feel very wronged after the trial. Okay. Any other part you disagree with? No. Exhibit 35B marked for identification. Okay. I'm going to hand you 35B. Okay. So I'm going to start the line 22, page 141. Do you see where I'm at? Yes. And so I'm following up on Ms. Schuler's testimony. I say, so you just testified that he felt very wrong during the trial, and that he felt vindicated by the verdict, and that was very upset by making a murder. Is that a fair summary of what you said? She said yes, and I asked. That was my thought when I was done. Take a look at page 354, so flip a few pages, same exhibit. Exhibit 8, tracking number 354, okay, in the top, yeah. Top row, 4 lines in, shortly after I retired. Do you see that? Yes, I see it. Shortly after I retired, attorney Jerome Beauty, who said you were well aware of the slander and defamation is, found out through an unscrupulous reporter who has gone out to his way to make life miserable for me, particularly on my own doing, that I was retiring from law enforcement. Did I read that correctly? Yes. Who was making your life miserable? Do you want me to name the unscrupulous reporter? Yes, John Farrack. Okay, I couldn't tell based on the sentence. On an unsolved hidden run at the time, and I believe that's why the article was about. Again, without having a question, it's hard for me to determine what, but it's easy to research Ms. Farrack's work into trying to make it look like the sheriff's department was somehow involved in covering up a hidden run that she's still unsolved. Well, Andrew Colborn, why did you and James Link tell Ricky's mother that the DOJ had investigated and they couldn't find anything, but then when she contacts them, they said this is the first time we've ever heard of anything? I understand, thanks for the context. I would love to get to the questions, and we're trying to get to the transcript of the audio. Would you look like at number 25, the proposed stipulations? Is that it again? I think this is just loose leaf one right here. Okay, got it, thank you. And again, it's the one we proposed, not the one you signed, okay? And my question is, given testimony in the document which you looked at, will you agree to number 25? So, Ms. Walker, even in the document says the article by Mr. Farrick prompted a lot of death threats to the directed at Mr. Colborn. I'll agree to number 25 with my former statement that I don't know if the article had anything at all to do with the Avery case or it's just an article about the unsolved hit and run. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. How many death threats do you get because of an article that Mr. Farrick wrote? You know, I didn't separate them into categories of, well, Mr. Farrick wrote this, and so I got this amount of death threats here. Just kind of cataloged them all, several. And you don't have really, if any understanding, you don't really have any way of knowing whether the death threats you received were because of Mr. Farrick or because of something else. Oh yes, I do. Sometimes they mention making a murder specifically, telling me that making a murder prompted them to call. And the other way? Well, I didn't receive any death threats until after the release of Making a Murder, and Making a Murder gave John Farrick most of the material. Okay, any other way? No, that's it. So what we've talked earlier today about statement, Mr. Burnett, that's pretty close. Miss Walker, yeah, can you still hear? Okay, I'll keep going through it so we don't waste time. How tall is the building? We're on the 18th floor. I lost my train of thought, so we talked earlier today. It's a cheap tactic for depositions. Ms. Walker, you composed the Blue Angels. Is that it? Mr. Burnett, yeah. We talked earlier today about a statement you made at the end of the trial to the press. Do you remember that? Yes, I do recall that. And given the stipulation that counsel read into the record, I assume you made that with the permission of the Sheriff's Department, correct? We're talking the end of the Steve Avery's murder trial, correct? Yes, the Sheriff's Department instructed me to do that. And did you know that the statement was recorded and included in episode 8 of Making a Murder? Well, I haven't not watched episode 8. Now I don't know the statement was made, so I don't know the context or anything. I'll read the statement to you. You told the press, I hope and pray that this verdict helps put to rest the suspicion or loss of confidence that this community may have felt towards our department, because I assure everyone that the agency has come of the finest law enforcement officers in the country and its employ. I know you don't remember it word for word, but does that sound like what you said? I certainly would have stood up for my department, yes, and I still pray for the Hallbach family, so that sounds consistent. Does it make you feel better to know that it was included in episode 8? Mr. Burnett, objection, form A. Answer, I would have to watch episode 8 and see which context, how it was used, like, was it used to ridicule me? So then, no, I wouldn't feel better about it if it was used. But you don't plan to watch episode 8, correct? As I sit here right now today, talk with you, no, I don't plan on watching episode 8. But I certainly no reason I can't change my mind at some point, okay? Let's go to Exhibit 37. Do I have that one or no? I'm going to give it to you. Okay. So Exhibit 37 correctly is Mr. Colborn's response to interrogatories in the case. I have marked the different responses, supplemental responses, the signature pages, Exhibits 37A, B, C, D. It's a little confusing given the way things kind of came in. But let's start with Exhibit 37A, which is Mr. Colborn. I'll read what you do first. Like, have I taken anything today? Yeah. Do you have? I have acid reflux, so I took antacid. I have asthma, so I take an inhaler every morning, and medication for anxiety. I can't give you the name of it, not because I'm trying to withhold it, because I don't know. But my records, I believe I took one of those this morning. Okay. It's nearly 1 a.m. Do you think you're a good place to break for lunch and come back? Mr. Burnett, what time do you want to resume? Let's go off the record. Let off the record. Going off the record. Ms. Walker, all right. Mr. Colborn, I have some wrap-up questions from items we were discussing before lunch break. And the first one would be, would you agree with me that the interrogatory been questioned and reputation harmed at the trial? Yes. And you can't, as you sit here today, quantify the reputation and harm arising from the trial and contemporaneous media coverage that can come along with the trial. And can you? Objection. Form. I can say after the verdict, my reputation and everything went back to how it was. How do you know that? Because after the conviction and the negative press stopped, people began more favorable about the events of the trial, the unfolding of the trial, the conviction. It was just a general atmosphere that was more supportive. So the publicity disappeared, but the publicity disappeared, but the articles that were written remained out there. Correct? that were written during the trial? Yes. I don't know when they archived those, but I don't recall a blitzkrieg of negative press. Like after the release of Make or Murder, after Stephen Avery's conviction, you experienced sadness and anger and frustration around the time of the trial, correct? I don't know per se, per sadness, but other two, yes. Okay, anxiety, I don't really recall anxiety, but about distress at the time of trial. I can't differentiate between the two. I can differentiate between anxiety and distress. It seems to be one and the same. I can't really say distress, more angry. All right, let's take a look at Exhibit 38, which I will send to you. Okay, thank you. And I'll just ask you to confirm that this is a text message exchange with you and Ms. Schuler, and the date at the top there is July 2nd, 2017. Do you see that? Yes. And it was 18 months approximately before Make or Murder was released, correct? And you're not going to have a Perry Mason moment here. Do you read that correctly? Yes. So Mr. Strang here is saying, just because I didn't ask Mr. Colborn directly, did you plant evidence, doesn't mean we're abandoning the planted evidence theory. Is that what your understanding of what I just read to you? No, not really. Okay. Well, let's let the transcript speak for itself, and we'll move on. Okay. Do you ever sue Dean Strang? No. Why not? Mr. Brett, I don't want to know about the conversations with your attorney, so if there are any reason other than the attorney told you not to, I'd like to know why you decided not to sue Dean Strang. There is no other reason than what you just stated. Do you understand that you can't sue people for defamatory things that they say about you in court? I'm not asking for what your attorneys have told you. I'm just asking for your personal understanding. Yes, I was made aware of that. So it's possible, in your view, that Dean Strang and Jerry Beauty defamed you in court, and that's why you didn't sue them? Objection form, I assume, is the subject to the same limitations previously accumulated. Walker, yes. No excluded conversation with the counsel. Is that why you didn't sue them? Because even though you believe they defamed you, you can't hold them accountable for things they say about you in court? Same objection and instruction. Since the only person I talked about this with is an attorney, I guess I'm going to have to decline to answer that. Well, Mr. Beauty went on to write a book about the case, correct? He did. And you believe that book hurt your reputation, correct? I don't know. I never read the book. You have no sense at all about whether it hurt your reputation. I can surmise that it probably, yes, wasn't complimentary. Well, you could, but I didn't read it. And you could have sued Jerry Beauty for things he said out of court in a book, correct? Correct. And why didn't you? Miss Burnett, the same instruction. Answer, the only person I discussed that with was Miss Walker, was an attorney. I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 43. This is an email from you to Mr. Griesbach on January 8th, 2019. Do you see that? I do see that. That's the form of Mr. Griesbach to me, but I'm not exactly sure why it's doesn't have any conversation between me and Mike Griesbach. It appears to be an email between Mike Griesbach and Brendan Schuler. Well, that's exactly right. Exactly. Actually, and I can give you some more context here. So the bottom emails are between Mr. Griesbach and Ms. Schuler, okay? And then I don't know what the behind that redacted bar, okay? But I think that's where Mr. Griesbach spoke to you directly, and your counsel redacted it on the theory that it privileged information. But I want to ask you about, okay? What Mr. Griesbach told Brenda. She said, I wish we could sue his slandering ass too. Do you see that? Yes. And then Mr. Griesbach said, we've talked about it. Andy, me, and another lawyer who was almost on board a month ago. I love to sue Beauty, but it's very bad idea strategically, even though it would defeat federal jurisdiction. Can't further explain now. Did I read that correctly? Yes. And so here's Michael Griesbach telling someone who is not his client about conversations he had with you, correct? Yes, I do. But unless Mr. Griesbach was in the room with you, and any of us sitting here today were in the room with you, none of us can know 100% certainty, correct? I would think that I drove that point home in trial. Based on the subsequent conviction, I believe the jury was convinced of it. We would have to trust you, correct, Mr. Colborn? Yes, you would have to trust that I was telling the truth under oath. And the jury found for the prosecution and convicted Mr. Avery, correct? Yes, they did. And the jury findings were included in the making of murder, correct? Objection. Do you know? I have not watched a clip of any of the making of murder when the jury verdict is read, or so I can't answer any positively. I don't know what was included. I don't know what episode it was in. You have no reason to dispute that it was included, correct? I'm not alleging that. Okay. And you have no reason to believe that anyone from Netflix attended any portion of any proceeding against Mr. Avery, correct? I don't know that. I'm asking you only based on your personal knowledge. You don't have any reason? No. To believe that? No, I don't. So I'll take you back to Exhibit 1 that you signed this morning, and you could flip to the Exhibit A, which is the stipulation we proposed. On second, I've got to find that. Okay. And flip to Exhibit A, which is the initial stipulation we proposed. Okay. And I want you to point out that the first six, you declined to admit these, and my question for you is, as you sit here today in your personal capacity, knowing that you rely on your lawyers to process all evidence, but personally, let me ask you about number 1. Are you personally aware of evidence that Netflix employee attended or a portion of the proceeding involving Stephen Avery? I personally do not know. Correct. Number 2. Do you have any personal knowledge or any personal aware of the evidence that any Netflix employee has ever been to Manitowoc County, Wisconsin? During 16 and 17, we had an abundance of protests out in front of the courthouse with people screaming how corrupt we were and how they should be freed. And I thought Netflix was involved in that, but I don't have any personal knowledge of evidence, like no one ever brought someone to me and said, this person works for Netflix. Are you personally aware of any evidence that any Netflix employees ever spoke to anyone who appears to be making a murderer? I know where this is leading. I personally have no knowledge. I don't know if this did or didn't. Are you personally aware of evidence that a Netflix employee ever received or read any transcript from a proceeding against Mr. Avery involving Mr. Avery? Number 4, I believe I did see documents that did say that Netflix employees had viewed transcripts of the criminal trial of Mr. Avery. Do you remember anything about those documents? No, I don't. So we would just ask on the record that to the extent those documents exist and can be identified, the plaintiff produce them to us. Number 5, here. Do you personally have any or personal aware of the evidence that any Netflix employee ever received or watched any raw footage, any proceeding involving Mr. Avery? I believe my attorneys do have evidence that Netflix employees did view both civil and criminal, civil and criminal video of me testifying both in deposition and his criminal trial for the murder of Teresa Hallbach. Okay, do you understand that the raw footage or footage that was produced by filmmakers and provided to Netflix, or do you not know? I don't know. Number 6, are you personally aware of any evidence that an Netflix employee or received or watched any other raw footage used by filmmakers in creating making a murder? I personally don't know what they used or watched or know. So going back to Exhibit 2, the second amended complaint, referring to the paragraph 46, okay? Actually, it would be on the page 16, that last, okay? Of the bullet points, and you say that among the things admitted in making a murder, the last bullet here, Avery had a history of extreme violence and sexual aggression against women, including beating, strangulation, death threats, attempted abduction at gunpoint, and allegations of rape. Did I read that correctly? Yes. All right. So let's take each of those in the bullet at a time. Do you know if there was evidence present at the trial that Avery ever beat a woman? I don't. I don't know because I wasn't allowed to attend the trial other than the day I testified. So I don't know. So if I told you that the judge excluded that evidence, you would not have no reason to dispute me. Nope, because you weren't there. Correct. Okay, and so I take it you also don't know if evidence came in at trial that Avery ever strangled a woman? Don't know. And you don't know if evidence came in at trial that Avery ever made a death threat against a woman. Again, not during the time I was testifying did that come up. You don't know if the evidence was allowed. I don't know. Or not. I don't know if the judge allowed evidence to be presented to the jury that Avery attempted to abduct a woman at gunpoint. You don't know. I didn't see her testimony, but I do believe, I'm aware that she did testify at a criminal trial, the victim. Let's go ahead and mark Exhibit 57. Bro, you weren't even working for the sheriff's department when this fucking shit happened with Sandra Morris. But I believe, I'm aware that she did testify in a criminal trial. So, I'm handing you what's been marked as Exhibit 57, and as you can see from the front page here, there's a cover letter and there's order of the state's motion to allow introduction of 9 items of the other acts of evidence. Do you see that? What page are we on? The very first page, okay. Exhibit 57. Yes, I see that. Okay. And we can take some time to read through this whole thing, but I can represent to you that in this order, the court excluded evidence regarding Avery's conviction related to his having followed Sandy Morris in a vehicle, striking her with his vehicle and forcing her off the roadway, and then pointing a loaded rifle at her and ordering her out. The evidence was excluded in this order. You don't have any reason to dispute that, correct? No. Okay. And you have no way of knowing because you weren't there if the judge permitted evidence to present to the jury that Avery had raped a woman, correct? Correct. And if making a murder didn't include that evidence, that consistent with what happened at trial, as far as you know, correct? Objection form. Could you repeat? Sorry. Yeah. If these things weren't included at trial, and if making a murder didn't include them, the making a murder would consist with what happened at trial, correct? Objection. I'm not going to agree with that. Okay. Believe that making a murder was consistent with what happened at trial. Well, I think we can agree that if we want to know what evidence was excluded, we look at the Exhibit 57, correct? That's the judge's order. Yes. Okay, so we talked about the exclusion from the trial of the Sandy Morris incident. I actually want to play a clip from you for making a murder. This will be episode 1, which will mark in entirety Exhibit 58, and the clip we're about to play will mark Exhibit 58A. Exhibit 8 marked video playing. Have you ever seen this clip for making a murder? No. Okay, so if you look back at Exhibit 57, I can point out to directly at page 10 onto page 11 where the court excluded acts recklessly endangering the safety of Sandy Morris. And while you look for that, I'll just ask you, isn't it true, Mr. Colborn, that even though the judge did not permit the jury to hear the evidence, making murder included it? Objection. Yes, a portion of the interview was Detective Conrad, and a very small portion of the testimony included in the clip showed me, yes. And so, in the same sense at least, making murder painted a less flattering picture of Stephen Avery than the jury was permitted to hear, correct? I would appear to me, based on the reaction by people around the globe. Well, I'm going to move to strike, and I'd just ask that you answer my question, that this is a very unflattering thing to publicize about Stephen Avery. Not even the jury got to hear it because it was prejudicial according to the judge, but the filmmakers put it in a documentary, correct? Objection. Yes, it was in the clip you just showed me. You also complained in the second amendment complaint that the making murder portrayed an incident involving animal abuse and an accident and a worse childhood prank. Do you remember that allegation? Yes, okay. But you acknowledge that the story about the animal abuse was omitted from Avery's trial, correct? I don't know if it came up in the trial or not. Okay, let me point you to Exhibit 57 again, specifically page 7. There's a subhead, 1982 act of criminal cruelty involving killing of a cat. You see that? What page are you on? 7, page 7. And if you read at the end of the section 3 of the court's order, the last sentence is that the offered evidence fails all 3 parts of the civilian test is not admissible. Do you see that? What page is that when they mention the civilian test? On page 10 at the top. Oh, 10. Okay, they're talking about the animal cruelty there because it shifted to something else. The animal cruelty section begins at page 7. And it goes through to 8, 9, and it concludes on page 10. Alright, I see the area you're talking about. So the animal cruelty evidence was excluded from trial, correct? It looks like it. Do you know the making the murder included that story and showed it to the viewers? Objection. No, I didn't. Okay, let's play that clip. Have you ever seen that clip before? I have not. So based on this clip and the one to Sandy Morris, you would agree that the viewers of Making a Murder got more complete a picture of Mr. Avery's criminal history than the jurors did, correct? I would agree that the watered-down version of the acts were portrayed in Making a Murder while they weren't allowed in court. So at least the viewers of the documentary heard about him attacking a woman and burning a cat, correct? Yes. The jury didn't get to hear about that, did they? No. Ms. Baker, excuse me, counsel, is that clip 58B? Ms. Walker, yes, thank you. So even though you're not watched Making a Murder, I want to make sure that you understand the full scope of that it covers. Do you understand that it documents wrongful conviction for Betty Bernstein rape? Yes. And do you understand that it documents Stephen Avery's exoneration? I haven't watched any episode that it's in entirety, so I can't say how it's portrayed, but yes, I understand that it's included in there. And then you understand the documents the investigation treats Hallbach's murder, yes? And Mr. Avery's trial for that murder, yes? And do you know it's documented Mr. Dassey's trial and conviction as well? I don't know about it personally, but it's the first you've ever hearing that Mr. Dassey's in there. No, you knew he was featured in the documentary, okay? And you don't think their perspective, their pro-law enforcement worldview, keeps them from making a fair objection documentary, I take it? No, I don't. You're very pro-law enforcement, yes, pro-military, yes, conservative, yes, and you have a bias in that you are 100% convinced that Avery is guilty, correct? Objection. I don't have a bias that way. He was convicted by a jury of his peers. Well, he was, so I believe in that verdict, yes. Okay. He was also convicted of rape, correct? Yes. And that jury verdict was flat out wrong, correct? Correct. So juries can get it wrong, correct? Certainly. Even if you lose this case, you're going to believe that Avery killed Teresa Halbach, correct? Yes. Okay, and you believe Brendan Dassey was involved in the crime, correct? Yes. Ms. Schuler told us that her deposition, that documentary she's making, is going to be, quote, very anti-Stephen Avery, and, quote, did you know that is her goal and her perspective? Bullshit, Andrew Colborn. No, I didn't know that. Haha, funny, funny. Do you think there's any problem with making a documentary that's very pro, very anti-Stephen Avery? If she has factual information to back that up, I don't have any issue with it. So if we have factual information to back up that you're a piece of shit, you shouldn't have any problem with that either. So long as it's factual and accurate, making it very slant and truthful, making it very slanted and anti-Avery documentary is just fine. I don't know. Objection form. Once it's every single time that happened once, dramatic or suspenseful or cliffhanger or music like once or twice, probably not grounds for a lawsuit. Every single time a single person appears, that might be different. Okay, but it depends on context, yes. And we should view the documentary in its entirety. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that? Yes. So, okay, episode 1 through 10, correct? Let's go to Exhibit 35H, and here I was asking, this is page 231 of Schuler's deposition, and here I was asking her about some of the fallout from making a murderer and the potential fallout from convicting a murderer. And at line 22, I said to her, but you'd agree with me that what crazy people out in the world decide to shouldn't stop filmmakers from making content. There was an us quote, but there's anything documented, I believe. Again, watch it. To the extent Avery's accusations made it into the documentary, those accusations didn't change my opinion of Andy. That's not what caused our divorce, and quote, do you dispute that? Yes. Which part? I believe they already stipulated the whole marriage thing, so correct. Should we rely on your stipulation? Yes. Okay. Anything else dispute in the statement? No, nothing beyond that. Your ex-wife told us under penalty of perjury, quote, the lawsuit also had an impact on our marriage and exacerbated Andy's fixation. Andy just couldn't let it go of making a murder and Avery's accusations. He planted evidence to frame Avery for murder of Teresa Halbach, and quote, do you dispute what the ex-wife said there? No. That's one of the examples of how I've changed. I can't let it go of it. Okay, finally she told us, quote, I wanted to move on. I didn't want to let Avery making a murder ruin our lives. Andy couldn't let it go, though. Lawsuit only did more damage to us, end quote. Do you dispute this? No. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Exhibit 1 and look at your stipulation number 45. And you can set the list of names on the side, okay? So 45 says, some members of the law enforcement community supported me after the release of making a murder, but some did not. And you requested before signing that we add some did not. You recall that, correct? And so I did like to know the names of the people within the law enforcement community who did not support you. Well, I can't give you those names because I don't know the author of the article, but I can give you the department. Sure. Scotland Yard. Y'all hearing this? Scotland Yard. I don't need it, Mr. Colborn. Would you agree that the almost definition of the people who left those voicemails for you are unreasonable? Yes. No reasonable person would react this way to a documentary, correct? I've been reasonable people question me about it, yes. Well, that's not my question. No reasonable person would watch a documentary and then leave a death threat, correct? Well, I would hope not, but maybe your definition of reasonable and mine might be different. What about under your definition? I could see how some could be so moved by such a production that they may contemplate it. And follow through. You think there's reasonable? No, I don't think it's reasonable. Okay, so now I want to talk a little more about Miss Maurer. You didn't list her on your interrogatory responses, and I think your explanation for that yesterday was you haven't talked to her about the facts, underlying fact in the case of the lawsuit, correct? Question, Exhibit A, okay. Exhibit A1, your intentional letter, got it. And number 63, okay. So let me rephrase the question. You agreed to number 61, and you agreed to number 62, that the relationship with Miss Maurer harmed your marriage and you harmed your relationship with your children. Yes. And you're trying to understand how you can deny that none of this caused you anxiety and distress. Can you explain that? Well, I guess I can rephrase. Did the divorce cause you anxiety? Sure. Did the divorce cause you distress? I don't know about the anxiety, so what's the word? I'm not exactly sure of the difference between the two, but I would say certainly caused me some distress. Yes. Did you cause you to take anxiety medication? It was already prescribed anxiety medication long before this happened. Do you take anxiety medication because you were anxious about the divorce and the impacts that they having in your relationship? No. Did it raise your blood pressure? Well, I'm on meds for hypertension, again, long before the divorce came, so I don't regularly check my blood pressure anymore. Okay, did it cause you to lose sleep or to gain weight or drink alcohol more? No. Any other form of distress it caused you? No. Did it make you sad? Yes, of course. How long was the period of difficulty before you resolved the things you were children? Probably from May of 21 through September of 21, so that time frame. What happened in May? Is that when you told your children you were divorcing? Yes. Okay. Well, none of my children, with the exception of my youngest one, lives in Manitowoc County. The youngest one was told right away. So you stipulated that you involuntarily retired from the sheriff's department, correct? Yes. And you stipulated your retirement party, correct? Yes. And people came to the party, yes. And you felt supported at the party. By the attendees? Yes. I should mention the retirement party wasn't just mine. There was 3 of us that retired that exact same day, all from the Texas Bureau. So it was all of our parties, not just mine. You felt supported at that party, yes? So if you can look at the Exhibit 1 and the proposed stipulation 49, yeah, I think just back of the page there. I don't recall having a resume, no. Okay, and so presumably you were hired at the hospital based solely on your reputation. Is that right? Well, I filled out a job application online. That's how I got the job. Do you know the person hiring you? No. Did Making a Murder come up during the interview? No. Yes. Have the person interviewed watched it? They didn't tell me whether they watched it or not. Okay, but the existence of the documentary did not keep them from hiring you. Okay, you got the job. Is that correct? Yes. And you have good relations with your coworkers? Yes. You have taken any other job since retiring? Yes, I see it. You told the interviewer, when I announced my retirement, I received calls from tens of hundreds of people who thanked me and told me that I had helped them through a difficult time. They were glad that I did this or glad that I did that, and numerous people had apologized to me for not coming forward. Did I read that correctly? Yes. So we had asked you to stipulate to the following statements. Upon announcing his retirement, Mr. Colborn received supportive calls from dozens of people. Here you said you received calls from tens, if not hundreds, of people. So my question is, will you stipulate to the statement? I'll read it again. Upon announcing retirement. Where's the statement? Yeah, it's Exhibit 1 in my letter, number 51. Okay, thank you. Will you agree to the statement? Have you seen where it came from? Wait till we copy. Do you remember signing it? I don't even totally document looking vaguely familiar. I'm not saying it didn't sign it, but I do recall it. Okay. Remember feeling obligated not to defend yourself publicly because of an agreement you have with Ken Kratz? Well, no, not yet. I don't know. I'm not sure what this is reference to. I know I was trying to project similar to Convicting a Murderer, but with a different production company. So I'm assuming it might be related to but I'm not 100% positive. But I had to sign it. I probably would have tried to uphold my end of the agreement, but I don't recall signing it. So, as far as you know, it would just be your relationship with Convicting and your obligations to the Sheriff's Department along the lines of what you stipulated yesterday that prevented you from defending yourself publicly. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. You recall telling interviewers from Convicting Murder that you were inundated with requests by the media for interviews. And can't point to the document, but I'll ask you before you take the time to actually remember that. Number 8, it is okay. 353. Thank you. It's the third box. Okay, I'm there. The third box begins. The story, unfortunately, was not over there. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. Interesting, after the guilty verdict came out, I was inundated with a request by the media for an interview. Did I read that correctly? Yes. And you testified yesterday that except for the initial press statement that the department authorized, you never spoken to the media, anyone publicly about the accusation believed levied at you, correct? Not that I recall. Okay, Mr. Colborn, let me ask this. Do you understand the downsides for dollar figure on it? Okay, I would need a jury to make that determination. What about Jerome Beauty? Can you put a dollar figure on how much he's harmed your reputation? That would be the same answer. And Kathleen Zellner, she hasn't, so she's flipped from different theory to different theory. Now law enforcement isn't even a suspect anymore. Plus, this is being used in the court of the defense and the client, so I would have no standing in that. What about Dean Strang? Can you put a dollar figure on how much he harmed your reputation? I would just repeat the same answer that they gave you for Jerome Beauty and John Ferrick. Okay, Mr. Colborn, last few pages were about the medical records, and I'm going to try to not go through them one by one, interest of time, so we'll just get to a couple questions, and then we'll see how deep we have into these, okay? Isn't it true that you were not prescribed anxiety for hypertension medication until 2 weeks after you filed your lawsuit, December 28, 2018? That's 2 different prescriptions. Yeah, I can ask it this way. Isn't it true you weren't prescribed anxiety medication at any point while you filed your lawsuit? I don't recall the date I was prescribed. Well, you didn't go to the anxiety medication when Make Your Murder was released, correct? No. And you didn't go on anxiety medication that first year when you have told us you were experiencing all the backlash from Make Your Murder, correct? Correct. And you didn't go on it too with the second year after the release in 2017, correct? Do you have any medical record there so I can look at a date? Yeah, Exhibit 120. Thank you. So, where's the date? Yeah, I'm trying to find it for you. So, the date is about halfway down the page. It's today's visit. You saw Teresa Kruger Junk, nurse practitioner, Friday, December 28, 2018. You see that? And then above it says you started taking Besprin or Esperol. Esperol. Thank you. Yes, okay. Yeah, I see that. I see that date. Okay. And does that jog your memory as to whether December 28th, 2018 when you first started taking those medications? Yes, okay. So not 1, not 2, but 3 entire years after Make Your Murder was released, correct? Correct. And in fact, it was filing the lawsuit that seemed to raise your anxiety levels. Is that correct? No. Well, the lawsuit was filed in December 2018, and about 11 days later is when you went on the anxiety and blood pressure medications, correct? I would have to check on the blood pressure because I thought it was preceding visit, but I'm not 100% positive. But certainly, I was on them by the visit. It was the fact that they're just never going away, probably. Okay, when do you think you weren't on is the greatest? Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's okay. When do you think you went on blood pressure medication? So, because I have asthma and I have to have a visit every 6 months as opposed to a year, so I thought it was 6-month visit before that I would have gone on blood pressure medication. When would you have approximately that date? Well, I'm assuming June of 2018. Okay, does asthma tend to cause high blood pressure? Do you know? My asthma is pretty well controlled, but I don't know. I don't know that hypertension is a byproduct of having asthma, lack of a better word. Okay, I'm going to hand you where to mark Exhibit 117. This is another medical record. You can see about the third way down the page, date to visit December 14, 2018, which would have been 3 or 4 days before you filed your lawsuit in this case. Do you see that? Okay. And if you flip to the second page at the very bottom, there's a note that says, inform patient his blood pressure is slightly elevated. Discuss diet, salt restriction, exercise. He will monitor blood pressure at home and follow up and notices stays elevated. Did I read that correctly? Yes, you did. Does that jog your memory that, yes, that was maybe the first time you had elevated blood pressure? Correct. So 3 days or 3 or 4 days before you filed your lawsuit, correct? Okay, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 112. This is another medical report. This is from February 2018. Do you see that at the top? Where it says dictated on 2/9/18 or no? I was looking at the file on 2/12/18, but okay. It says you were seen on 2/9/18, so anyway, February 18th, correct? Yes. Okay, so if you flip to the third page, and it's page 155 that you want, yeah, it's also 156, okay. You see just, I got it, off by 1, so that would have been 2.5 years or so after making your murder's release, 2 years. Do you see that? Yes, okay. You filed out 2 screening questionnaires. One of the depression questionnaire, where 0 means not all and 3 is nearly every day, and you recorded a 1 out of, I don't think, 30 points here. That's 10 items. Does that sound right to you? Yes. Okay. So it's a very low score on the depression scale, correct? Yes. And you were being honest when you completed the questionnaire. Maybe, I don't know if it was honest or didn't want to be put on any sort of medication. Okay, well, this is, so I may have stretched things, but I would think that the most part I was honest. Okay, this is only medical records, our only evidence. Have our alleged anxiety correct? Correct. Okay, the second questionnaire is GAD, which is General Anxiety Disorder Questionnaire. Again, 0 means no anxiety at all, and in every category you put 0, correct? Correct. Okay, the next page toward the bottom, in all caps, is a word that says psych with a colon. You see that? It's on page 157. No, I don't see that. I think, so you don't see there's a page 156 at the medical report, then there's a Colborn 157. Oh, yeah, I have. So look at it. Oh, I see. Okay. Look on Colborn 157. Yeah, that's the page I have, Colborn 157. Correct. And you see the right ear psych at the top? Okay. It's actually at the top of the bottom psych. Yes. It says denies anxiety, depression, or mania. Yes. Do you see that? Yes. And that's accurate, correct? It's accurate that I denied telling her that I had it. Yes. So you're going to lie to your doctor. Why wouldn't you be lying right now? I mean, she's there to help you with your health so you can live longer. Why would you lie to your doctor? Andrew Colborn, why would you lie to your doctor? Okay, and again, we all have to go on in terms of anxiety and distress and emotional stress and medical records, correct? Let me object to the form of the question. Go ahead, your testimony here today, that's all we've got, correct? Correct. Okay, I don't think I've given you Exhibit 123, but I'm about to. Okay, Exhibit 23 marked identification. Oh, sorry. And this is another medical record. You can see at the top under counter information, it says 2/20 of 2019. Do you see that? Yes. Okay, about a year later. Is that right? Yes. Okay, go to the second page of the document at the very top, and it says anxiety. Do you see that word? Yes. And you told the doctor your personal situation had improved. Do you see that? Okay, and then there's on that same page another generalized anxiety disorder questionnaire. Do you see that? Yes. And you put mostly zeros. You scored a 2 out of possible 21. Do you see that? Yes. Okay. You were accurate in answering the questionnaire. Yes. Miss Walker. All right. So let's go off the record. I think I'm done, but I just want to check my notes. The videographer going off the record. We're back on the record at 11:18. Kevin, can I go ahead and make the statement before you start? Sure. We have the chance to discuss the time arrangement off the record, and I suspect to exceed the general rule for 7 hours. I've talked to Mr. Vick, and I'm going to let him Continue to question Mr. Colborn with the recognition that the most questions are going to be in subject matters on subject. Last question, the question before it. Oh, sure. Can I have the read back to me? Yeah, please. Do you agree that Mr. Kratz was asking questions here to make it clear that this call didn't motivate you to frame Mr. Avery for the murder of Teresa Halbach? Yes, and make clear that you didn't plant evidence against Mr. Avery. I don't know if this had anything to do with planting evidence. He was, well, I guess he would, if we go on the next page, yes, I'm only on 47, we're including 48. Oh. To be clear, I was asking about 47 and 48. Okay. If you like a moment to review, that's fine. Okay, I got it. Yes, that came up as well. Is there anything I'm missing here that you would say, a crucial point in your testimony? Mr. Burnett, back then, they start off eliminated, then I identification myself when I answered the phone. I said Manitowoc County Jail, Officer Colborn. Didn't identify myself as a deputy. By eliminating that, people watching this, and I'm dressed in a law enforcement uniform, and I'm just testifying, people automatically assume that when I was working in 94, 95, I'm a sworn law enforcement officer. Eliminating that because it was sworn law enforcement, my answering the phone would have been Manitowoc County Jail, Deputy Colborn, but I wasn't a deputy at the time. I'm a not a sworn corrections officer, so people know now are like, he's a law enforcement officer, but he doesn't do nothing with the information. And this is what you transferred the call to the detective, correct? Detective and the sheriff. I had no authority to. You've got to let me him. Yeah, I missed the end of your question, Kevin. I'm sorry. Is that what you transferred the call to the sheriff's office? Mr. Burnett, go ahead. Well, the jail is part of the sheriff's office, but that's why I transferred the call to an investigator. Yes, sir. Do you know if the fact is reflected in the American word that you transferred the call to the detective? I'm not quizzing you on the contents of Mr. Colbert. I'm just asking if you know. I don't know if they're making a murder or not. Let's look at different clip, okay? Episode 7, still I'm looking at minute 17, second 36, and minute 19, second 10. Still sharing, yes. So the clip that we just saw, Mr. Colborn, that makes it clear that you received this call in 94 or 95 when you were a corrections officer, right? Wishy-washy about that, pretty unsure of myself. For instance, have you ever planted any evidence against Avery responded to trial? Ridiculous. No, I have not. And then the second, Mr. Kratz asked me, have you ever planted evidence against anyone in the course of law enforcement? With the whole question eliminated, instead it looks like an answer. Have you ever planted evidence against Mr. Avery by saying I say that it's the first time? Integrity is an every question. Doesn't come across very forceful and convincing. It's hardly answering the question. Do you feel that the accusations that were planted evidence against Mr. Avery were calling into your question of integrity? The question was, have you ever planted any evidence to anybody in the course of your law enforcement career? That's my answer to that question. Mr. Colborn, I'm going to move to strike. That was not my question. My question is leaving this for a second. Do you feel the accusations against you that you planted evidence against Mr. Avery, that he called you into question integrity as a law enforcement officer? Yes. And you feel like this scene shows denying that the planted any evidence against Mr. Avery? I'm sorry. The scene of making a murder? Sure. Let's just show me the clip of this. Is this what you're asking about? The clip we just looked at. You denied having planted any evidence against Mr. Avery, right? Yes. Okay, last one. If you could move on to page 52, Exhibit B. Okay, and that's interested here is where it starts. Oh, maybe a quarter of the page down. It says redirect an examination. Okay, I see it. So just looking at the section. Okay, yes. That Green Strang asked about the subject matter during the cross-examination. Yes, and then Mr. Kratz on redirect wanted to respond to some of the points that Mr. Strang had raised. Right? Yes. Mr. Kratz wanted to make clear that you hadn't written a report about the call in 94 or 95. Yes. And that if you had written a report, you would have known what it was about. Is that right? Correct. That you didn't know the call was even about Mr. Avery. Correct? Correct. Is there anything I'm missing here that you key understanding of your testimony? Mr. Bennett, objection. Form. I explained in the presence of all these questions in the presence of the jury. I explained to the presence of the jury my reason that I didn't write a report has been eliminated from testimony. It just simply says I don't know what it would have been about, and that it actually questioned that I received a call transferred in Executive Division. That would have been no need to write a report every time you received a telephone call and transfer it. Certainly there's no agency in the face of the earth that does a report about that, and the whole explanation has been eliminated from the testimony there. Let's take a look at the clip. Okay, and it's still episode 7. It's a minute 23, 48 seconds, 24 minutes, 5 seconds. So the clip that we watched again has made it clear that you didn't write a report in 94 or 95 about the call, correct? Yes. And that you had written a report, you would have known about it, right? Correct. And we can agree that the line about whether you knew the call was about Mr. Avery was not in the clip, right? Steve Avery case was the first episode airing tonight, right? Yes. And I'm looking down at the 5th line in the middle. Do you see where it begins? It says, I didn't know Stephen Avery? Yes. I'll read that. It says, I didn't know Stephen Avery from Adam until 2 years into my employment with MTSO in 1994. And then only by name did I read that correctly. Yes. Does it refresh your recollection with what you have in 94 when you first heard the same name, Stephen Avery? I see it as 1994 on that. I believe that's a typo. I don't recall anything in 94 when I was working in the jail as it pertained to Stephen Avery. I really don't. You just told me that your employment began with Manitowoc Sheriff's Office in 1994, right? No, 92. 92 rather, yes, in 92, correct. 92, yes. But this sentence says, I didn't know Stephen Avery from Adam until 2 years into my employment with MTSO. Boom! Got him. Right there. That just proves that his phone call came in 94. So wouldn't that timeline be correct then? Well, the timeline is correct, but I was confusing with something I guess I didn't recall. I didn't sit there and tell, I heard this name Stephen Avery in 1994 because I didn't recall. But you would agree with me that it says here in this email that you wrote in 2015. Yes, I agree with that. Yes, sir. Do you remember what you heard the first time you heard about Stephen Avery? Well, my recollection is the first time it was heard of was in 1996. Okay, we've talked about the timing, and that you're saying you think it was 96 despite the fact that this document says 1994. Yes. I want you to move on to the question of what you heard. Did you hear your first heard Stephen about Stephen Avery, regardless of the time of when it occurred? Okay. So I thought, probably current jail inmate. He didn't give me a name, and I said, again, identify myself as a correction officer. He recognized that I wasn't a law enforcement officer and that he had called the jail. So I either told him, I think you're going to probably want to talk to the detective, or he said, can you connect me to the detective? And I gave him the number, which transferred him. And then I transferred it to our chief investigator, which that position has been changed to lieutenant, but at the time his rank was CI, chief investigator, and I transferred it to him, his phone. Who was the chief investigator at the time? Gene the Pencil Couche. And that's whom transferred the call to? Yes, sir. Did the caller from other county? Did that mention anything about the nature of the underlying crime? All they said was assault, which could be bar fight, or could be a DVO. And location, they said he told was he it? Located earlier, which was the statement you were prepared on September 12th. Yes. Now, so would you agree that based on this document, at least what this document purports to say, is that your statement was, in fact, kept in the Sheriff's Department safe? Yes. And yesterday you stipulated that the fact right. Yes? Okay, now you said that James Link had given some incorrect information to the Sheriff Peterson. Yes? How did you know that? The paragraph that reads, Sergeant Colborn said he was later informed by someone that the case was already solved and the right person was arrested. I never said that. Question, how do you know that's what passed on to Sheriff Peterson. I'm reading it off the statement, so I wasn't there when I don't know what he said verbally to the sheriff. That was going to be my question. Whether the lawsuit, other two, I don't believe so. How much of Making Murder would you estimate the watch before you filed the lawsuit? Like in what context? Minutes? Sure, minutes. Less than 30. How about as you sit here today? Do you have any sense of total number of minutes? And if you want to give me a range, that's fine. 45 to 60, probably less than 60, 30 to 45. Is that so? You've only let me make you understanding this correctly. You've watched 30 to 45 minutes, or it's still 30 to 45 minutes total? Meaning, no. You've only watched an extra 30 to 45 minutes, additional minutes. Okay, gotcha. Sorry. So then it's total of like an hour 15? Possibly, yes. Mr. Vick, okay. This is a good time to take a break. Said, well, I'm going to get the game plan together. We might bring it to more detective. I'm going to wait until it shows up. I said, well, by now, they might start to realize that this girl's missing. I'm going to sit on the Zipper's residence until the guys are ready to go out. So I sat in a different patrol car because I had marked unit. I had to turn that back over. I don't believe I took a marked unit out there, but I might have, and I sat in the parking lot of a church. And there's a point that Brenda thinks that Dave Remiker asked me to run the plate, and that's when I called it in. But I don't believe that be the case. But I didn't argue with her that it isn't possible. Well, while Andrew Colborn is sitting in the church parking lot across the street from the Zipper's residence, we can hear Dave Remiker asking, does anybody know what that plane came at to? And Andy says, negative. Now, the only other plate that he would have been running would have been the car that was sitting in the Zipper's driveway. It's either that one or Sam William Henry 582 when he calls the fucking sheriff's department from his cell phone, and they're all communicating with cell phones. You have John Dietering on the radio asking Andrew Colborn if he has a cell phone and to call him. The question is, while Remiker and Jacobs and Colborn and Dietering are at, Jacobs is not there, so I've been up for a really long time. So Remiker, Colborn, and Dietering go to Zippers. Colborn's waiting for Remiker and Dietering to arrive. We know Jacobs is nowhere near anybody because he calls the dispatch to find out if they got in. So where is James Link during all this? Because we got Uyghur calling dispatch, gets passed over to Colborn. Colborn then contacts Link because we have dispatch paging Remiker and Jacobs because Link requested their assistance. Stephen Avery Andrew Colborn drives past the Zipper's house and goes directly to Stephen Avery. Supposed to be going to the bar Beyonda, but they talk to Stephen Avery at his mom's house. The time from he does that until the time he's at that church parking lot, what in the hell is he doing? That's my biggest question. And the time he says he could have seen Stephen, he couldn't have because we have video of him at Menards, and we know that I know the exact route that Stephen Avery took to get to Menards. So they leave the Avery property, they get to Jambo Creek, Steven says he sees lights when they're turning off of Avery Road, so Chuck goes to Jambo Creek, turns around, goes back to the Averys. He gets out, looks around, gets back in. They then go down to make a right again, take Jambo Creek all the way down to Fisherville over, and then a bunch of zigzagging. He didn't take the main highway, he took a bunch of back roads. They go to Menards, they walk around Menards, they purchase their lumber, they check out, then they have to go to the lumber yard to pick up the lumber they just bought, and after they leave there, they go to the jail. Steven puts $50 on Jody's books, and they return home, and he's home by 9:33 to receive that phone call from Jody from jail. I think it's right, but sorry, one there's a rant. Maybe two denials in this clip earlier, right? Yes. I like to look at Exhibit 2, which is your Second Amendment complaint, and I actually have the one handy for once, and I like for you to look at paragraph 33, and I'll read that paragraph. Okay. It says a central part of Avery's defense trial was the plaintiff and other Manitowoc officers planted Hallbox SUV at the Avery salvage yard where Avery residents in the house trailer with plaintiff on the stand. Avery attorneys played portions of the call to dispatch in an effort to convince jurors that he came upon the SUV at an undisclosed location on November 3rd, 2 days before it was found at the salvage yard. Cross-examining plaintiff about the contents of the call. Avery's attorney suggested the plaintiff was looking directly at Hallbox's vehicle. When he called dispatch, the claim was entirely baseless and false, and defendants knew of the falsity. Did I read that right? Yes. Well, it's baseless allegation. The defendants knew of the facility of the essential part of the Avery's defense. Objection. They were sitting in the courtroom and saw my complete, unedited testimony. Now, you were alone when you made that call to dispatch, you said, right? Yes. So you're the only one that would know for certain whether or not you were looking at Teresa Hallbox's car when you made that call, correct? Yes. And Avery's. I don't have an eyewitness with me, no. And Avery's attorneys were suggesting the opposite, right? I wasn't really sure what Avery's attorneys were suggesting. I don't want to speculate or tell that that's what they were doing because I don't know. But your testimony at trial, but it's the sentiment that some people were saying at the time, right? Objection, foundation. The sentiment that some people expressed to you at the time, yes. So then, Mr. Colborn, how can you say that my clients knew that Avery's defense attorney's theory was false? For the reason that I said, that they sat in the courtroom the entire time, they were privy to the information the average citizen wouldn't have. Was that the information? Again, I had a gag order. So when people would ask me that question, I would say, we can't discuss the case. There was a lot of people that didn't know for a long time that Brenda Dassey had confessed to investigators, and then the investigators were able to locate evidence based on Brenda's confession. People may not have known that the murder weapon was hanging over his bed. People may not have known her bones were in his backyard after he mutilated her and burned her up in his pit. The needle, yes. Hypodermic needle hole in this case made an assessment of Avery's blood drawn by the polygamist and stored in violent connection with the 1996 post-conviction motion in his wrongful conviction case. Procedure initially resulted in the secretion of hole and rubber stopper. Polygamist drew the specimen from Avery in 1996, prepared to testify that what happened in this instance didn't read that correctly. Yes. What is the basis for the allegation in the next sentence, which is having attended the trial in its entirety, defendants Riccardi and Demos were aware of the routine nature of the hole in the vial of rubber stopper, and the polygamist who drew the specimen from Avery was reported to testify? Mr. Burnett, objection, foundation. Well, let me rephrase that. Do you have any personal knowledge basis for making an allegation in the sentence that I just read? I'm personally aware that the clients were in the courtroom for an entirety, and I've seen the Making a Murder episode where it's portrayed as a great day for the defense. This man contradicts himself so much. Now, he says he didn't watch any of the trial except for the days when he was in the courtroom. Now he's... yeah. I was positive to learn that they didn't film it. Yes, they would. Do you recall that Norm Gahn is in there in the section when it's being discovered? I viewed the portion where Jerome Beauty was making a call to counsel. You recall a little bit later, Norm Gahn is in it too. Who was in the prosecutors? I don't know who. I know who Norm Gahn is, but I didn't review the portion of it. So why do you think that my clients were aware of the routine nature of the hole in the vial's rubber stopper, and that a phlebotomist who drew the specimen from Avery was prepared to testify? Objection, foundation. Do you have any personal knowledge to support the portion of the allegation? I don't recall the motion hearing where there was discussed that was presented or not. So I can't, again, a lot of these documents are the work product of my counsel. I didn't compile all this information. And Mr. Deputy Kucharski, can you understand how they might have some uncertainty about three explanation of how the key came to be found that day? Mr. Burnett, objection, foundation. I don't have an instituted distrust of law enforcement. I trust law enforcement because I was in it for 27 years, so I like to think that my testimony, that when I say something, people understand that I'm under oath and I'm saying the truth. If I don't know the answer to the question, I say I don't know. But can you understand how people didn't know you personally? I'm not saying that they necessarily think that you're lying, but how they could walk away from hearing the explanation of how the key was found and just say, I'm not sure what happened. Can you understand that? Mr. Burnett, objection, form of foundation. My explanation at trial was that the only possible way I could think of that key got there, where, correct, Miss Walker talked yesterday about certain things regarding a number of Avery's prior crimes that were not presented in juries. Also right. Yes, we talked about that yesterday, yes. So I won't repeat the stuff that we went on yesterday, but I did want to talk about some other things that include making the murder of the President Stephen Avery in a negative light that were not even presented in the jury, but reflected in the making the murder. Are you aware of the making the murder includes Chuck Avery's statement that after Brendan Dassey's confession, he was, quote, pretty positive, and end quote, that Stephen Avery probably had murdered Teresa Halbach? No, I hadn't seen that. And Chuck Avery is Stephen Avery's brother, right? Yes. And you aware that making the murder includes a scene where Barb Tadich tells Stephen Avery that she hoped he burns in hell for that? What he did? Her name might be pronounced Tadic, but no, I'm not aware of that. Did he just fucking correct? Are you aware that there... Red flag. Just saying. Are you aware that there's a scene of making murder where Stephen Avery tells his parents that they figured out to get him on a bail within 2 weeks he was going to give up and kill himself? No, I'm not aware of that. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder where Stephen Avery himself opines that the prosecution was, quote, going to win anyway? No, I'm not aware of that. Are you aware that Making a Murder contains interviews with some people who violent crime was in Stephen Avery's character? Others say it was not. Well, I haven't seen interviews with people that say the police didn't Making a Murder. I haven't seen any clips or any video where people are saying that they believe they. Law enforcement got it, so I'm unaware of that. I'm really trying to limit the number of clips I show you given the time crunch. Sure. I'm going to pose instead rather questions. Okay? Are you aware that there's a scene where Stephen Avery's sister says the violent assault is not in its nature? No. Are you aware that there's a scene where a member of the media says that it's become because he was one of the usual suspects around Manitowoc? No. Are you aware that there's a scene where a proceeding judge in the Penny Bernstein case says that he believes Avery's prosperity against violence against women in particular was a fact? No, I'm not aware of that. Isn't it a good example of Making a Murder showing different viewpoints and opinions regarding Stephen Avery's character? Objection, form of go ahead. I would have to watch the entire thing and offer an intelligent answer on that, and I haven't done that. Are you aware that Under Sheriff Herman is an interviewer in Making a Murder? No, I wasn't aware of that. Are you aware that they're extremely critical of Stephen Avery's allegations that evidence was planted? I'm not aware of that. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder where not only denies the planting allegations, but characterizes them as, quote, impossible, and quote, far-fetched, end quote? No, I'm not aware of that. Now, instantly, you can against Under Sheriff and replace Ken Peterson as Sheriff Manitowoc, right? Yes, I did, but Making a Murder includes a clip of him. I'll represent that Making a Murder includes a clip of him very vigorously disputing the planting allegations that were made against law enforcement officers. Are you aware of that? No. This is your position that Making a Murder is biased against law enforcement. Yes. Are you aware that Laura Riccardi, as yesterday or today, about the fact that or a reaction and ability to comment to the case while you were at Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, right? Yes. But you testified you were allowed to give a statement after Stephen Ray was found guilty, correct? Yes. And you aware that Making a Murder contains press coverage where a statement is read aloud? Attorney Walker, did you tell him that yesterday? Yes. Are you surprised that Making a Murder included your public statement? I'm not 100% sure what I told Ms. Walker, but I would like to see the context in which it portrayed. Well, I don't have a ton of time, but this one might be worth it then. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Can you tell me what episode this is? I'm sure it's episode 8, which is, I believe you say you never reached. Right, I never did. So if they spent episode 1 through 7 making me look like a villain, I'm guessing episode 8 inclusion of my statement isn't going to take very seriously, but the viewing public who's already made up their mind that I'm a villain. I'll move on to strike that. It means what the question was. Okay, you asked me that what the episode was, right? And I was trying to provide information. I know I don't. Time is precious at this point. I'll just say you might look for yourself. It's episode 8. Okay. Rating 33 to 34. I think you may. It's up to you. You might find it actually just a pretty neutral presentation and news coverage, or just reading your statement. Okay, thank you. Did Brenda Schuler tell you about Making a Murder, including coverage of her public statement after receiving every conviction? Not that I recall. Did Michael Griesbach tell you that? Again, not that I recall. Ms. Barker, I'm sorry, before we were attorney did, and you said that you recall it doesn't matter, right? But again, to be clear, I don't want any conversation between you and Mr. Griesbach once he was your attorney. Thank you. Now, how was it that you were selected to give the public statement? I believe the department felt that it had the worst luck with the media and didn't know 100%, but I thought it was also wanted Jim Link to do one as well, and he refused. So then it fell into you to do it. That's because Jim Link lied in trial and got caught. Well, I think initially it was going to be both of us, yeah. But yes, then it was only one left, and they coupled that with you will do it. I mean, you were happy to do it, did it? Give you a sort of sense of vindication? I can't say it gave me a sense of vindication, but yes, I was hoping with the Hallbox would appreciate that. We can conduct the investigation to the best of our ability and ethically. But you weren't supposed to be there conducting the investigation. You were there just to help in case they needed assistance. Besides the public statement, did the sheriff's office allow you to make other public statements regarding the case? Not that I recall. Now that I've allowed you to make statements about the case and allowed you to interview Making a Murder, what would you have wanted to say? I don't know. I'm very distrustful of the media now, so I can't say 100% whether I would even do it. But you're going to participate in a documentary for the rebuttal. Would you have wanted to see, would you have wanted to have statements that, were guilty of things that some people were saying that you did? If I were to give a statement that would be included in there, it would emphasize a lot of those media attempts and eroding the public's confidence in law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And while we're human and imperfect for most part of the criminal justice system, does it get it all right? I already told you about Under Sheriff Herman's calling the planting accusation far-fetched and impossible, right? Yes, sir. So I'm going to play you something from episode 5, which I believe is one of the that you've seen, or parts of the episode. I take that back. I'm going to show you a clip from Norm Gone. Are you familiar with this scene? No. Would you agree that the show's prosecutors pushing back quite vigorously against the planting theory? Yes. And they refer to officers being accused as being good, solid, decent family men, right? I don't think that I saw that, but I don't recall hearing them say that. I thought it was centered more around the testing of the blood, or we have right to have our reputations protected, or something to that extent. I'll go on another clip that may be more directly about you. This is episode 7. Oh, the one I showed you was episode 5, 108, 234, okay? I'm going to show you episode 7, 1355, 1428. Mr. Riccardi, you're in episode 5. Mr. Vick, oh, this is still in episode 5. My apologies. I'm in episode 7. Well, would you agree that the show's Ken Kratz rigorously disputing the plaintiff's allegation? Mr. Burnett, objection. That appeared to be out of court interview. Yeah. With reporters, not in front of the judge, like a preceding one. Oh, you're absolutely correct. I'm not limiting that just to the court. I'm saying, would you agree that this is an instance of Ken Kratz, out of court, to the media? I think the word he used was deplorable to describe planting theory. Is that accurate? Yes. So this is another instance where making a murder shows people pushing back strongly against the planting theory, right? That particular clip? Yes. Have you ever seen a clip before? No. Okay. Same thing, episode 7. I'm going to 2429 to 2450. Again, this is going to be another one of a court, okay? And this is another instance showing someone, yes, I've seen that one. And do you appreciate that was in the episode? Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't appreciate anything about making a murder, but I appreciate that the reporter asked a question to Attorney Strang. And do you appreciate that the reporter's question was included in the episode? Without watching it in its entirety, I have to say the more original answer that I do appreciate. Anything about making a murder, I do appreciate it all. But you've testified that you haven't seen the whole series, correct? Correct? And you want to use my time showing you all the episodes? Okay. I'll represent episode 7, 34, and 45, 3508 if you have any interest in seeing this later. I'm sure your counsel could probably get it for you. Yes. There's another episode of Norm. There's another instance of Norm gone sticking up for you. Is there something you're aware of making a murder? No? Well, that's the one you just showed me. Or it's a different one. Okay. Are you aware that there's also footage, a scene, yet another instance of Norm gone? This is time at a press conference where it's pushing back on the planting theory? No. Are you aware that during the press conference it calls it a quote, despicable allegation? No. I'm not aware of that. Would you say that Norm Gone, there's calling a despicable allegation pretty accurately captures your own views of the allegation made against you, Lieutenant Link? Certainly. Are you aware that their clip in episode 7 making a murder that shows Mike Halbach giving his views? Stephen Avery? No. Are you aware of that? That it shows that Mike Halbach believes Stephen Avery was guilty and was lying when he claimed to be innocent? I'm not aware of them making a murder, no. Somebody had ever told you that Mike Halbach was in. There was a scene involving Mike Halbach giving his opinion what Stephen Avery was guilty and was lying, particularly pertaining to making a murder, correct? That's correct. Are you aware that there's a scene in Making a Murder in which Judge Willis provides a view of Stephen Avery as, quote, probably the most dangerous individual to set forth and set foot in this courtroom in Making a Murder? Yes, in Making a Murder. No, I'm not aware of that, Making a Murder. After the deposition, are you going to watch the entire episode of Do You Think? Sergeant Colborn, Mr. Burnett, objection calls for speculation. As we sit here and talk right now, I don't have any intention, but I certainly will seek the advice of my counsel on it. Prior to bringing this lawsuit, did anybody tell you about the clips that you have discussed in the last hour or so in which various individuals defended you? No. Do you think they could change your overall view of the series? No. How did you know without watching them? Well, I can't. You just said that what I do, I think, so I thought you wanted me to render an opinion. Did John Ferrick's columns typically include quotes from people in law enforcement who were defending you? Who were saying that these are despicable allegations that were being made? Not that I recall. I like to look at Exhibit 1146. Thank you. This is another text between you and Brenda Schuler, right? Well, yes. And it says at the top, Andy, sorry to bug you. I just deleted the emails not long ago from you. Ken needs them again. And he lost them. So sorry. Can you check the emails to me, please? Your sent file, please. And your response is, I may have a hard copy, but I think I deleted them from my sent file. And anywhere else after Ferrick demanded all of our emails. Would a hard copy work? And he says, I don't specifically recall the statement, sir. Would it surprise you to, I don't want to waste time, but would it surprise you to see a text in which you said something like that? Is the text to me? Yes. Do you have the text? Sure. Just take a look. Exhibit 1144. Do you have that one? You don't yet? Okay. I've been jumping around out of order. Okay, sorry. 1144, marked the vindication. I'm looking at probably the third page of the document. It's the one at the bottom that says 8179. Okay? And down at the bottom, her last comment, well, right above that, you say, I would guess they aren't going to like this deposition. And then she says, I'll pay anything for a video. I mean, anything. And you respond, laugh out loud, I know what you mean. Ms. Schuler asked you, I don't know what she's talking about there. You're not sure if she's talking about whose, I would guess they aren't talking to. I don't know whose deposition she's talking about. Well, I remember the conversation. I'm not denying that was my text messages. I'll make the question a little more broader. Has Brenda Schuler asked you for any of the materials that you've gotten in this case? The civil case? Yes, the civil case. No, I can't recall her making any sort of request for me to give any materials for the case. I think she knows that the materials are in the possession of my counsel. And she hasn't asked you to, notwithstanding that, to pass on some of those materials to you? Not that I'm aware of, no, that I can recall. Was it supportive about bringing the lawsuit? Yes, initially yes. I'd like to show you Exhibit 1145. And this is another text chain between you and Brenda Schuler, correct? And it's dated 11/30/2018, right? And that's less than 3 weeks before you filed your initial complaint in this action, correct? Yes. And the top says, can you talk to me? I need to call you, right? Yes, she said, yes, and that's what the text says. And you say, trust me, my friend, you are going to be up your neck in this just like me. Laugh out loud, correct. Yes. And then she responds, Andy, not going to lie, I think I'm reaping you now alone in a really bad idea. If you had to go to internet people, do you understand people means people? Yes. To get simple questions like these. Is this the amended complaint? It is, yeah. Okay. Ms. Burnett, are you positioned to wrap this thing up? Mr. Vick, we are great. I like to look at paragraph 37 specifically. Okay. So here you say, defendants Riccardi and Dumos strategically spliced reaction shots of plaintiff appearing nervous and apprehensive at trial into other portions of the testimony where you did not appear nervous, apprehensive. In fact, do you see that? Yes. Do you recall what is about your demeanor? Any other shots that made you look nervous or apprehensive? Was there anything that you can recall, right, that made you feel that way? Specifically, the clip that showed me that I committed earlier was it appears that DJ is giving me some sort of stare down, and then the pans to the shot of me leaning back and cracking my knuckles. I did that during the recess of a review of the jury. Certainly didn't do it in front of the attorney to Strang, but it certainly does not make look nervous, apprehensive, and have been caught in some sort of lie. Now, Mr. Colborn, I'm not sure if you're aware, but during this deposition, the last couple of days, you've kept your head down a decent amount. Does that sound right? I'm frequently reading, but yes, are you sometimes had your head in your hands or cracked your knuckles in the course of the deposition? Does that sound right? Okay, I don't recall that, but I don't know what you want me to or what you're trying to. I can't clarify a little bit more. Well, in the possible that maybe things like cracking your knuckles or looking down, that's just a natural mannerism of yours. The footage that I watched my trial testimony frequently make contact with whoever questioning me. I was not trial given a stack of documents to look at this, told frequently to go to this page or go to that page, look at this, look at that. Until the session, knock it off. Now, if you do watch Making a Murder in its entirety, will you agree to supplement either a stipulation or some sort of answer? Let us know whether you've in fact watched the whole thing. Questions for me and Will. Mr. Vick, that's all we have. Thank you already. All we need to sign. We're done. Videographer off record 440. Certification page. And Andrew Colborn signing. And then we go to Exhibit 6, which I'm going to read the rest of these documents later. There's over 1,000 fucking pages. And yeah. Well, I need to get my ass to bed. Y'all have a good day. For those that are still watching at this time, because not many people watch the Colborn information because they're not really interested. So, see y'all next time. And next I will be doing his wife's depo. Y'all have a great day, and I'll see you guys probably in whenever I wake up.